Hello, I'm Marcy Zwakaf. This is number 0797, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0797. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, we have a visit once again from journalist and foreign correspondent Ivor Davis. He has a new book out that's very personal. It's called The Devil in My Friend, and it chronicles the story of a friend who committed murder. Ivor thought his friend was innocent, but quickly learned otherwise in his research.
One day I came back to California where I live, and all of a sudden, with my wife Sally, I saw Fred's list of insurance scams. A burnt boat, a burnt guest house, a burnt house, and he collected money. And then I realized at that moment, believe me, my neck shuddered, that Fred Rayler had upped the ante, and not only had he claimed from insurance companies for years, this was the ultimate claim against his wife and his stepson.
Diane Bator is the author of the new mystery series Dash Ullman P.I. Volume 1. In previous series, Diane describes her protagonists as powerful women who are very nosy. So, where does Dash Ullman rank on that scale?
I wouldn't say Dash is really powerful, but she is definitely nosy. She just kind of reacts to things. She doesn't really go into action, she reacts. So she does the things that a lot of people would be, I'd love to do this, but I don't dare. She'll do it. She runs this little detective agency. She has been a detective since she was 12 years old, and she lives on breakfast hot dogs from one of the local food trucks. So yes, she's supported them for many years.
Science writer Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is back with the story of Voyager phoning home with an antiquated communication system on a spacecraft that NASA thought was lost to them forever.
They thought they lost the spacecraft. They thought it's dead, but it's like the Energizer Bunny. It just keeps on going, even though it was using its backup communication system, which, by the way, it hasn't used since 1981. It worked. And even though they flipped basically their instruments to start listening in this backup S-band as opposed to the X-band, which is a much more stronger way of communicating, they picked up the feeble signal and were able to get back into communication with the spacecraft.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news and, of course, an idiot of the day. The guest Slater, the person who told you this was show number 0797, was Montreal-based artist Marcy Zwakaf. You can check out her Instagram page, which also leads to her Facebook page, by going to our website and the number she just said, which was number 0797, and you'll find the links. See how it all goes around full circle? Yeah. Thank you very much, Marcy, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make the show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. Sotheby's in New York sold a banana duct taped to a wall for $6.2 million. The artwork, titled Comedian, was purchased by Chinese cryptocurrency mogul Justin Sun. Said Sun of his recently acquired piece, "In the coming days, I will personally eat the banana as part of this unique artistic experience." The banana was purchased for just 35 cents. Comedian was first created by Maurizio Catalan in 2019. "Wherever I was traveling, I had this banana on the wall," Maurizio said of his process. "I couldn't figure out how to finish it. In the end, one day I woke up and I said, the banana is supposed to be a banana." Oh, that's deep.
Have you gone bananas?
An Australian woman has been charged for her involvement in an organized crime group claiming to be psychic. Tina Montana was formally charged with identity theft, money laundering, and fraud among other crimes. Police claim that Montana and others defrauded 4 victims out of large sums of money and property by offering psychic services. Officers seized tarot cards and crystal balls in their search of Montana's residence. Said Detective Inspector Craig Brooks, "We will be alleging that these offenders have taken property from their victims and not returned it in breach of what the victim would have expected." You know what the obvious question here is? If Montana was indeed a psychic, how come she didn't see this arrest coming? A TAP Air Portugal plane was grounded at the Ponta Delgada airport for 4 days after 132 hamsters escaped. Gee, was it 132 hamsters or 132 gerbils? I always confuse the two.
Not gerbil, sir, a hamster. Gerbils are more streamlined and hamsters have a tendency to be fluffier. And the male hamster's scrotum has a tendency to be disproportionately nibbling.
TMI. The critters were en route to a pet store when they escaped into the cargo hold. The plane was kept as a precaution in case the rodents made their way into the plane's electrical wires. After being thoroughly searched, the Airbus A320 was cleared to fly back to Lisbon. A plane full of hamsters. Good thing Samuel L. Jackson wasn't on the flight. Also, if they were going to a pet store, then where did they come from? Was it from some secret hamster lab?
I like to concentrate on the positives. Healthy hamsters bred from a genetically deficient hereditary line. It's actually very exciting.
Again, TMI. And we have one more Stuff File news story to share with you before we get to our first guest here on the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. And we continue our transportation theme. Villa V Residences is offering a multi-year cruise for those who want to escape the upcoming Trump presidency. The tour will cost less than $40,000 per year and visit 425 ports across 140 different countries. The 1-year package is called Escape from Reality, and the 4-year package is known as Skip Forward. Who really is going to take such an expensive cruise? And what kind of people would be interested?
We're going to load it up with some bad dudes, believe me. We're going to load it up.
And when it comes to people who only take the 1-year package, what would the president say when they returned?
They're leaving our country. And then when they come back, we take them back. Oh, come on back. Where were you? Oh, come on back. Go home. Enjoy yourself.
I don't think he'd be that forgiving. Anyway, CEO Mikhail Pedersen said, "We feel we have a perfect product for those who said they'd leave the country if XYZ wins the election. We may have differing political views, but our community comes together through our passion for exploring the world." Yeah, I'm reminded of a classic Stanley Kramer movie from 1965. And no, I'm not talking about It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. That was earlier.
This is a ship of fools. I'm a fool, and you'll meet more fools as we go along. This tub is packed with them.
There are many stories here, but there is only one ship of fools.
Anyway, let's get to our first guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program. We have one of my favorite people back on the show, foreign correspondent Ivor Davis, who has written several books, including Manson Exposed, a reporter's 50-year journey into madness and murder. Well, he's chronicled another true crime, but this one is personal. That's because the perpetrator in this murder was a friend of his. The book is called The Devil in My Friend, which was written decades ago, but only got into print this year. Ivor joins us once again via Zoom from California. Hi, Ivor.
Hello there, Peter. Good to talk to you again.
Great to talk to you as well. This is, again, as I said, a book that has taken you decades to get published. What was the drawback? And we'll go into the story as to what the crime was, which involved your friend.
Yes, I wrote the book originally 40 years ago with my late wife, Sally. And we were about to be published by a very big publishing house. Then Fred Rayler called the publishing house. He was in prison, would you believe? having been convicted of a murder, of a first-degree murder. And he threatened to sue the publishing house. Okay, now you'd think a gigantic publishing house would say, F you, forget about it. However, at that very time, Joe McInnes had written a book about a Green Beret captain who had murdered his wife and kids, Jeffrey MacDonald. And the book was called Fatal Vision. And McGinnis had been sued by Jeffrey MacDonald, the Green Beret captain, and the trial went on for 6 months in federal court, and it was a hung jury. It cost the publisher maybe $500,000 to defend it. The water in that time, the atmosphere, the temperament was scared publishers. And my publisher didn't want to get involved and said to me, do you have E&O insurance? I thought to myself, what the heck is E&O insurance? Do you know what E&O insurance is, Peter?
It's insurance that writers have in case they're sued
Yes.
or for defamation of character.
That's right. It's called errors and omissions. Well, I was a new writer, and to be honest with you, what did I know about E&O insurance? So when I said no, the chicken-livered publisher, who are very big, pulled out. This was under my skin. And when my wife died a few years ago, I looked at the book again and said, I want to bring this book out. It's an incredible human story about a man and a woman who think the best of a friend, and it turns out to be your friend, in this case, was a cold-blooded killer. So I shortened the book, tightened it up, added some new stuff, and out it has come to, I must say, fantastic reviews. I'm delighted with the reviews, and hopefully one of the streaming services might pick it up as a movie and miniseries, who knows. But that's the background to why it took so damned long to bring the book out.
Now, I understand the story is about Fred Roller, who was arrested and then convicted of the murder of his wife and her
second wife and her son.
And her son.
And our 8-year-old son, Douglas, who was exactly the same age as my son, Gideon. And the reason I got to know Fred was because when he married his second wife, Verna, he came to me and said, I have a new stepson, Douglas, and I want to get close to him, and he's on your soccer team. Can I be your assistant coach because it will help us get along? And I said, Fred, of course. He was a terrific assistant coach. He knew nothing about soccer, but he came to the practices and he was dedicated. And we actually won the local young kids title. And Fred came to me and thanked me for helping him. And then I gave him a book about soccer and we remained friends. The kids went to each other's birthday parties. And then 2 years later, I picked up the paper and saw on the front page that Fred had been out in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Santa Barbara, and a terrible accident had occurred. His new wife, Verna, and Douglas, the stepson, had drowned. Fred had been miraculously rescued, as was the dog that was with them. They died. Fred survived. Happy after. No, not happy ending. But at least Fred had lived. And then 3 months later, I pick up the paper, front page story. Fred Rayler is arrested for the murder of Verna and Douglas, and the modus operandi, why he collected something like $720,000 worth of life insurance on them. Well, that was a lot of money then in 1980. Wow, what a lot of money that was. It's worth about $3.5 million today's market. And I thought this was a terrible thing. I couldn't believe Fred would have done it. And I went to the trial, lasted 9 months in Santa Barbara. And at the end of it, much to my amazement, Fred was convicted. I even testified to the jury not to give him the death penalty, along with other friends testified. And Fred was given life without the possibility of parole. Okay. Sorry if I'm going on too long, but let me just give you the kicker. So when I went to see Fred in prison, he was at Folsom Prison, which is a pretty terrible hellhole. Most prisons are. I said, I want to write a book about you, and I'm sure that you didn't do what they convicted you. So I went back to his hometown and I spoke to 50 people who knew him growing up, and 49 of them said, if there was $1 in it, Fred Rayler did it. And they gave me a negative picture of Fred Rayler. And then one day I came back to California where I live, and all of a sudden, with my wife Sally, I saw Fred's list of insurance scams: a burnt boat, a burnt guest house, a burnt house. And he collected money. And then I realized at that moment, and believe me, my neck shuddered, that Fred Rayler had upped the ante, and not only had he claimed from insurance companies for years, this was the ultimate claim against his wife and his stepson. And when I told Fred Rayler that a lot of people were negative about him, he said to me, I want transcripts, and he was in jail. I want transcripts of every interview. I want to tell you who they are and why they said it. I said, Fred, most of the people were scared. They only allowed me to interview them on the grounds of anonymity. And Fred Rayler said to me in prison, okay, don't come and see me again. And since then, I've never spoken to him. So that's the nutshell story. And, there's so much more, but I'll let you get a word in edgeways.
Well, I was going to ask, during your investigation in writing the book, didn't you realize or understand that there was some suspicion about the death of his first wife, who I believe also drowned?
Yes. I mean, the reason why the cops got involved was a neighbor of Fred who knew the first wife, Jean, who died in the swimming pool of an accidental drowning. Beautiful airline stewardess named Jean. A woman called the sheriff and said, hey, losing one wife to drowning is a terrible tragedy. Losing two wives to drowning, look into. And the cops looked into it, and they came up with this insurance fraud, insurance claim, money idea, and they pinned it all together, and they went to trial with it. But even then, I just couldn't believe the man I thought I knew was such a cold-blooded killer. But it shows you, I mean, do we have friends that could be that way? Do we really know what goes on behind the bedroom door? I think not.
Well, one of the things is, I mean, you are an amazing correspondent, a foreign correspondent. You're an investigative reporter. You wrote the book on Manson. Did you and your wife at the time, did you both feel when you were going into this, especially after having given a character witness at his own trial, when you finally realized what exactly had happened, did you feel, well, how could I, Ivor Davis, an investigative reporter, be this duped by a friend?
I think there's no doubt we did. But then I realized it was my fault, really, because don't we try, Peter, don't we all try when we meet people to see the good side of them? And to be so conned by this guy. I mean, he not only conned me, he conned his own family, his own in-laws, and his mother-in-law into believing he was innocent. And again, getting back to, I mean, look at your friends, look at your friends' friends. Have anything, I mean, this is an extreme case, isn't it? It turns out to be a killer. I mean, you do discover, I remember friends said, well, I trusted my accountant and he conned me out of money. In Hollywood, how many managers have been sued by their clients in Hollywood for ripping them off? I mean, look at the Los Angeles baseball guy, the famous guy. I mean, I'm not into baseball. The Japanese guy.
Ohtani.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, look at that story. I mean, the guy conned him out of millions of dollars. So are we too naive? Are we naive? Do we see the good side of human nature, really, and we're dupes? Or is it our arrogance that we think we know everybody? It's an interesting psychological discussion, which I mean we're not going to get into. But that's you answered the question. I thought I knew a guy. It was my arrogance, and I didn't know him. I saw the nice side to him, but there wasn't a nice side. There was also a vicious, nasty, evil side.
You said that he didn't want the book to be published, and that's why it wasn't published 40 years ago. But
correct.
He's still alive, I understand. And
he is.
How does he feel about this book, or have you not even heard from him in regard to the book?
I mean, I heard from him when he knew the book was coming out. He wrote to me from jail and said, I need to see the book. And then I turned his letter over to the lawyers at the publishing house, and they said, don't respond, because whenever we do a murder book, there's always somebody wants a copy of the book, and they said, don't respond to him. But I tell you this, knowing his nature, Peter, I don't expect to hear, I will hear from him again. I will hear from him again, because when I looked up what was happening to him in prison, I saw this, and you're not going to believe it. He is currently suing the warden of the prison and every supervisor person there for this reason. He's in a lawsuit, and the lawsuit is he was taken to see a doctor off the prison grounds and in his wheelchair, and when they were wheeling him back to his cell, the wheelchair fell in a hole on the road leading to the prison, okay? And as a result, Fred fell over and was badly hurt, and he sued them for civil rights and all sorts of things. So Fred Rayler is now a wizard, legal eagle. He is the go-to guy in the jail for other prisoners, and I'm sure eventually I will hear more from him, because that's the nature of the beast.
Your late wife, who you wrote this book with, she died a little over a decade ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
During the time that you were writing this initially, up until the time that your wife had passed away, did the two of you ever discuss the idea of eventually releasing this book? And if so, how do you think she would feel right now, the fact that you actually do have it out now?
I think she would be delighted, because we didn't discuss doing it, because I got involved in writing other books, and Sally was a writer and a broadcaster herself, and you get on with your life. But when I looked at the book again, I mean, it was so well written. The best writing in the book is Sally's writing. She was a brilliant writer, wrote for the New York Times magazine and from major magazines around the world. So I looked at it and thought to myself, in a way, this may sound rather corny, but I'm going to do it for her memory, because it's about wives being murdered, and wives, and this is a tribute to my wife, who put blood, sweat, and tears into the book. And finally, I know up there she'd be smiling. I'm not crazily religious, but if you know what I mean, I think she would be happy.
The book is called The Devil in My Friend, and Ivor, I thank you once again for being a guest on the program. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me, Peter. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Stay well.
Ivor Davis, author of The Devil in My Friend. That man is always a delight to talk to. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0797, and you'll find the link to Ivor's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
I only seem to get sick on weekdays. I must have a weekend immune system.
Join us again for another Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestuffileprogram.
Malik here. Wow! Listen to this really happening liner music. That's radio jargon. I'm hip to the room. While I bust to move and get down with my bad self, let me tell you, you're listening to Peter Anthony Holder, the hippest dude in the crib. Yo, rap unk.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk to the author of Dash Allman P.I. Volume 1. Plus, Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is back to talk about, among other things, Voyager phoning home. Yes. We also have an Idiot of the Day coming your way and lots more in Stuff All News right here, right now. There was a shooting that was school adjacent, but luckily police were nearby. What now? You're saying that it was an off-duty police officer who was doing the shooting? Okay. The individual who was arrested in connection with a shot fired in a Painville Township Elementary School parking lot in Ohio was 34-year-old off-duty Cleveland police officer Alexander St. Clair. St. Clair works out of the 5th Division and is the former public information officer for Cleveland Police, one of the most prominent roles in the department. Riverview Elementary School was placed under lockdown because a shot was fired near the exit of the parking lot at around 9 a.m. Chief Deputy Robert Izzo said the incident involved 2 individuals and no students. Izzo said the deputy assigned as the school resource officer at Riverdale was made aware of the incident, approached 2 vehicles that appeared to be involved, and heard a single gunshot. The deputy saw Sinclair outside of the vehicle with a firearm and ordered him to drop it. Sinclair dropped the weapon, and the deputy was able to detain him after a struggle. Prior investigations indicated that the situation started as a domestic dispute and ended up on school grounds, where the car being driven by Sinclair collided with the other vehicle. The shot fired went through the windshield of the second car, but did not strike anyone. All students and staff were safe. The shot was fired away from the school building. Sinclair, once considered a rising star within the Cleveland Division of Police, is now facing criminal charges, including felonious assault and kidnapping. You know, even when you're a cop, it's never a bring your gun to school day. A Florida man has been arrested after allegedly pretending to be a police officer to avoid a background check. 64-year-old William Dennis Milstead was attempting to lease a property, which usually requires a background check. However, Milstead has been accused of submitting a falsified letter claiming that he was an undercover agent working off-grid. The letter reportedly contained many grammatical and spelling errors. Milstead was booked on November 13th, and the investigation is ongoing. According to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Milstead has previously been charged with impersonating an officer in both 2002 and 2016. So clearly, Milstead's downward spiral began a long time ago. And I'm not talking about 2002 or 2016. I'm talking about grade school. You can't pull off any kind of scam with grammatical and spelling errors. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, there is a mystery afoot.
This week, the case of the missing Chipotle burrito bowl.
Wells Fargo analysts found, upon visiting 8 locations in New York City, that Chipotle burrito bowls weighed up to 33% less at some locations.
She was staring up at me with those big, sad eyes, but all I could think about was the missing burrito bowl.
Some TikTokers reported that recording Chipotle employees resulted in larger portions being served. Now, one of the chain's shareholders is alleging that Chipotle misled investors about its portion sizes. The lawsuit claims that investors suffered significant losses and damages over the controversy.
And now for a commercial break.
Chipotle, the burrito bowl that everybody wants.
And we're back,
said Scott Boatwright of Chipotle during an October 29th earnings call. Portioning is a core equality of ours in the organization, and we are committed to ensuring that we give the right portion to every guest that walks into the building. I wonder if that's just lip service, or does Boatwright mean it for real?
Real ingredients, real flavor. Chipotle, for real.
Anyway, let's get to our next guest here on this edition of the Stuff All program. We had author Diane Bator on the show earlier this year, back in March. Then she was talking about the first novel in her latest mystery series, a book called Written in Stone. Well, she's here with a quirky new mystery collection. This one is called Dash Almond P.I. Volume 1. Once again, Diane joins us via Zoom from Alberta. Hi, Diane.
Hi, Peter. How's it going?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks very much once again for being on the program with us. Now, this is the second time we've talked about a mystery series, and you were starting one then. So how many mystery series do you have out now?
5. When I left my publisher back in January, they all kind of came down. So right now there are 3 that I've started to relaunch. And the Dash Almond series actually was a short story in an anthology. And I've done so many of them, I thought, well, I'm going to do them as a little collection so people can read along the whole story of Dash because she's quite the character.
Now, I remember back in March when I asked you why so many different protagonists, you said you write a lot of very powerful women who are very nosy.
Yeah, that sums up Dash too. I wouldn't say Dash is really powerful, but she is definitely nosy. And she is definitely one of those people with, she just kind of reacts to things. She doesn't really go into action, she reacts. So she does the things that a lot of people would be, I'd love to do this, but I don't dare. She'll do it.
Her full name is Dashiell Allman, and it's called Dash for short. I understand that she lives at the beach in a cottage, which sounds idyllic, but not necessarily the case.
Yeah, not in her case, no. She runs this little detective agency. She has been a detective since she was 12 years old, and she lives on what are they called? Breakfast hot dogs from one of the local food trucks. So, yes, she's supported them for many years.
Okay. It almost sounds like the female version of Jim Rockford from the Rockford Files.
Absolutely. I used to love those shows. Like, oh my gosh, I can picture them. But yeah, there's all of those old shows that just had those detectives that you'd just love to be friends with because they just got to do kind of crazy stuff. And I think that's kind of where she came from, is that side of me that I was like, well, what if I could do just whatever?
Absolutely.
You know, end up with these quirky adventures. At one point, she is being dragged down the beach by a llama. There's another one where a cat breaks into her house, and it's just they're fun adventures, but they're quirky, they're fun, and she's always learning and growing, and yeah, it's kind of cute.
And as you say, it's quirky. It seems to be that your various protagonists and your various books that you do, mystery series, that they're different in tone, not just in character.
Absolutely. I mean, some are a little bit more serious, but these, like with Dash in particular, because there's a maximum of 10,000 words for these short stories, you have to make it engaging and move along quickly and just keep your readers' interest, especially. You don't have a lot of room for all of these big, extra stories, but there are like little overarching stories that go through all of the short stories themselves, which is why I thought it'd be kind of fun to do it as a book collection as well.
So is volume 1, is this in itself a collection of short stories, or is it just one story within volume 1?
Nope, there are 7 short stories. So, if you don't feel like reading a whole book, you can read a whole story in one sitting. You can try to put it down, but they are lots of fun, and they bring you right into Dash's world, living on the beach, and all of these characters she meets, including a group of 10-year-old basketball players who are coming up. They will be in the next volume, but that story just came out last weekend, so it's still in the anthology.
One of the things I often say to people is when you have the opportunity to read something, if you haven't been reading a lot leisurely since, say, high school, right? That if you haven't worked on your novel muscle, as it were, get a collection of short stories, because that will engage you in a way that's in shorter periods of time, and that will get you to reading more.
Absolutely. Like, I love short stories just for that fact. You can just sit you're not reading for hours on end. If you don't have that time, you can just sit down, and if you have an hour, or even if you have 15 minutes, you can at least get partway through it and go, oh, okay, there's my bookmark. I'm coming back to this. They don't take very long. They really don't.
Okay, so there are 7 stories within this volume 1. What are the kind of cases that Dash gets involved in?
Oh my goodness. The very first story takes place when she is 12 years old, and she gets involved in a jewelry theft. And yeah, you get a real feel for her upbringing and her parents, and how she meets one of her fellow, or one of these police officers who basically is her mentor as she grows up, which is kind of cool too. As I said, there's this whole scene in the Christmas story where she's dragged down the beach by a llama with Santa Claus chasing them, which continues on through several stories because it goes viral. She has a viral video unto herself, that one. I'm trying to think what else is in there. Oh my goodness, there's so many stories.
Well,
there's
just
the dollhouse.
Just on the ones you described, do you sit down and also you talked about your family the last time we were on the show together, and so I'm just curious to know, when your family reads some of the stories you have, especially in the short story genre that you're working in right now, do they see the outrageousness with each story, and do they wonder, gee, Mom, gee, dear, how can you top yourself the next time?
I don't know, because I always seem to be able to do that anyway. So, but I do, like, it's been really great. Like, currently I'm living with my daughter who's almost 30, and we've just been sharing an apartment for a little while. And it's kind of fun because she'll read them and she'll just be sitting there shaking her head and giggling. So I'm like, okay, good. That's a good sign right there.
Is there anything that is never too outrageous for one of the characters that you write? Like, do you sit down at the computer and you go, no, I can't write that?
No. I mean, so far, things just kind of come along. And the great thing about the Dash stories is the publisher that I'm working with those, they give you the title of the anthology and you go from there. So there's no restrictions. You have 10,000 words or less, and it has to be clean. They are cozy mysteries. Those are the only restrictions, which are so much fun. You can your brain you kind of go crazy with, oh, well, what kind of animal or whatever is she going to meet this time? We've done the llamas, we've done the cats. There's one coming up. There was a pink flamingo. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. It's always, what can I throw at her this time and see what she does. So.
Okay, so this one is just out fresh, so you probably haven't gotten a lot of feedback yet. But as you say, you have a grand total of 5 different mystery series that are out there. So what is the reaction from the fans? And are you ever surprised by the reaction that they might give you that you weren't considering or didn't think of when you were writing these novels?
Sometimes, because I mean, we all perceive different things in different ways, right? So sometimes somebody will read something you wrote in a different way than how you intended, which isn't always a bad thing, because then that makes you as a writer go back and go, okay, well, I have to watch how I word this, or okay, this worked here, but you do have to watch for the sensitivity part of it as you're writing as well. But for the most part, like I sent out a copy of the Dash book to a few writing friends. So the reaction, they just giggle and they say that she's one of their favorite all-time characters in any of my books. So I'm like, okay, good. And maybe this is a good thing. So I'm having fun writing her, and so far everybody's been having a blast reading her.
Are all of your book mystery series geared toward the same general audience, or do you have specific audiences that you want to reach with each book? And if so, what's the audience that you're looking to reach with Dash Allman P.I. Volume 1?
Dash is kind of as I say, she's kind of a quirky character. So she doesn't really have, a lot of my target audience will be women. They're usually women like 20 and up that will spend more time reading or have time reading, or unless they have lots of little kids. But, I don't sit there and go, okay, well, who am I writing this for? I write this for me because if it makes me laugh while I'm writing it, I really hope it's going to make my readers laugh too. And it's for anybody. Like I don't specify genres or not so much genres. I don't specify genders and that sort of thing. I've written stories with transgender characters. There will be a lot more of that coming too, but I just love people to read and enjoy.
Now, I asked you this the last time you were on. You've got so many different series out right now. The possibility of putting them together in any way, shape, or form?
You know what? I hadn't thought about it until you kind of brought it up the last time. And now that I'm going through and doing a bunch of re-edits and relaunching them, I'm not going to say no. Like I still have a lot of work ahead of me as far as all the books go. But as I'm redoing it, I can keep that in the back of my head and go, well, how could these two series mesh together?
With so many series out, do you ever get out of the house?
Unfortunately, I have to have a job to pay my rent. So especially now that I've done all this big switch over and all of that, I shouldn't say unfortunately, because sometimes I work with the public. I'm always in the public eye and stuff. And oh my gosh, some of the ideas you get. I think without that job in particular, I think I would struggle more as far as having human contact and that sort of thing. But I love working with the public in that you get some of those great ideas just from absolutely innocent interactions and stuff. And I've always got a pocket full of notepaper.
Well, congratulations on the latest series. This is called Dash Allman P.I. Volume 1. Diane, thank you very much for being on the program with us once again.
Oh, thank you so much, Peter. I really enjoy coming on your show.
Diane Bator, author of Dash Allman P.I. Volume 1. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0797, and you'll find the link to Diane's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
I don't know. I don't think anyone can prove that a bottomless pit is bottomless.
Morning Shower Thoughts.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestuffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestuffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Hey, how would you like to become a patron of the Stuff File program? It's easy to do. By going to patreon.com and becoming a patron, you help to make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. And if you become a regular patron, as a Patreon reward, I'll share with you an electronic version of my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with two men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. You've heard me say on many occasions about the myriad of celebrities I've had the chance to talk to that are contained in my book, which is published by Bear Manor Media. You've also heard me mention that some of the celebrities in my book, and many others, can be heard on our page at patreon.com. If you've been on the fence about joining Patreon, let me try to pull you over to our side. Join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with two men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
Latitude 47 degrees 14 minutes north. Longitude 84 degrees 39 minutes west. Location Montreal, Canada. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. Now, the Stuff File presents Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. It's radio that's out of this world.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is a member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and the author of National Geographic's Backyard Guide to the Night Sky, and also National Geographic's Stargazer's Atlas, the Ultimate Guide to the Night Sky. And Andrew, Voyager phoned home on an antiquated system. I'm assuming it must have been a collect call.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty much the most extreme kind of phone call you could ever imagine. It's amazing that it can be done. The feat is incredible. So just to set the scene, we're talking about a spacecraft that was the forerunner as the robotic ambassador for humankind out into the entire solar system. It basically did a reconnaissance of all the outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, after having launched in the late 1970s, 1977. It flew by Jupiter in 1979, Saturn in 1980. It's literally 24 billion kilometers away from us. It's about the size of a subcompact car, if you can think about it that way. It just is the farthest spacecraft from Earth that humankind have sent. And it's incredible. After so many decades, it's still functioning enough that it's doing analysis of where it is in space. It's past Pluto. It's gone into officially interstellar space. So it's a really big deal. On board, there's a radioisotope thermoelectric generator that supplies enough electric power to run a few instruments, including the radio transmitters that are on board. And so what's been interesting is that there's been hiccups already with the transmitters, and it seems like a few weeks ago, it flipped into the backup transmitter, which works at a much more lower energy, and the signals are much more feeble. The engineers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California were thinking they were not going to be able to, they thought they lost the spacecraft, which, by the way, has happened numerous times in the last few years. They thought it's dead, but it's like the Energizer Bunny. It just keeps on going. And even though it was using its backup communication system, which, by the way, it hasn't used since 1981, they didn't even think this was even functioning, the S-band transmitter, it worked. And even though they flipped basically their instruments to start listening in this backup S-band as opposed to the X-band, which is a much more stronger way of communicating, they picked up the feeble signal and were able to get back into communication with the spacecraft. So it's incredible. They don't know exactly what's going on. They're hoping that they can flip it back to the stronger form of communication through the X-band. We'll have to see, wait and see. And that should play out in the next few months. They said it may take a few months for them to resolve all the issues. But the main point is that we're still in communication with this spacecraft that launched in 1977.
Wow. It seems to be that they've written this thing off for dead several times in the past. And these are the guys who built the thing. I'm just wondering, does it give them any aha moment in going forward with other things that they have built that only had a certain lifespan? Like, for instance, the rovers on Mars, they seem to be extending their life to a certain degree more than what they was initially planned for. Does that change the way they build in the future because they realize that there are checks and balances, and of course NASA always does things with a redundancy plan in mind, that they can now build things thinking about how it will go on beyond their point of warranties, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I mean, with Voyager, the wish list that they had was, what they wanted to do and is look at all the outer planets, which they did. Everything else that beyond that was, cherry on the cake. Did they ever envision it being, functioning out to this? I think on paper, between the engineers who built it, they probably said, well, look, I mean, it has this thermonuclear, generator on board. It technically should be able to, the plutonium breakdown, the heat that it's generated and how that's converted into electricity. All of that was on paper possible. Did they actually think that it would happen that way? I don't think so. I think there was that remote possibility that it would survive. I mean, we're talking over 40 years plus. And by the way, the lifespan, they're looking out now, knowing what they know now, they've readjusted their thinking, 2036. So another 12 more years they think they can get out of the Voyager one. But I think it really set the mark in terms of what the lifespans of robotic spacecrafts can potentially be. And yes, we, as you mentioned, we see that playing out on Mars with the rovers going way past their due date, their warranty, so to speak. That space does the environment of space, while being extreme, if you build the spacecraft in a hardened way to withstand that extreme environment, it can actually almost preserve the spacecraft for much longer periods of time. Now, on Mars, these rovers won't last as long as Voyager because of the rough and tumble environment that Mars does put them through, and all the dust storms and everything. Eventually, it'll catch up to them. But Voyager 1 is kind of like almost like cocooned, is just hardened, and it's working on minimal energy. Theoretically, could just go on forever if it wasn't for the thermoelectrical generator that'll eventually, give out.
You mentioned all of Voyager's qualifications. You forgot one major point. And that is, of course, it was the plot point for Star Trek, the motion picture.
I knew you'd bring that up. I was waiting. I was like, when is he going to bring that? Yes, that's right. It's pivotal. Of course, what was that, Voyager 7? The mythical Voyager 7, which I think, right? Was it 7?
Yeah,
I think it was.
Or V'ger.
Yeah, V'ger. That's right. As it was redubbed. Yeah, that's right. Because of the alien race. Yeah, but we'll see. I mean, very interesting that you bring that up. I mean, right now it's sitting 24 billion kilometers away. It takes 23 hours for the signal to come to Earth, by the way, one-way trip, right? Think about that. That's how long. At the speed of light, the radio signal takes almost a full day to reach us. So it's a very slow communication. But if we look into the very distant future, Voyager will probably, in about 40,000 years from now, will pass within 1 light year of a nearby star. That's about 4.3 light years away. You kind of wonder, is there going to be any other alien race looking at this little emissary, with the gold plaque, right, that's on board and everything. So it'll be interesting.
Well, we have just about a couple of minutes left, and I want to talk about China because they're planning to make their space station bigger.
Yeah. So this is something to take note. I mean, it'll pan out over the next few months and years. It's basically 3 modules that the Tiangong space station that China has put up as a rival to the International Space Station. It was finally fully assembled a couple of years ago, actually, in November of 2022, and now they're thinking of expanding it further. It's 3 modules in a T formation, and they want to make it into a much larger X formation, if you could think of it, with more modules being placed for scientific instruments and tests, and being able to house more astronauts eventually. And this is all part of China's long-term vision of having a permanent presence in space for the country. And of course, it involves going back to the moon, and their space station is a stepping stone towards that. So it just really reaffirms that China is here to stay when it comes to space exploration.
And for those who are into space and know about the ISS, let's do a comparison. How much smaller is it than the ISS? And because of China building onto it, will it eventually be bigger than the ISS?
Well, that's a good point. It's a guessing game, if it will. I mean, right now, the space station is literally a fraction. I think it's like 1/10 of the size of the International Space Station, which is the size of a football field and can house upwards of a crew of 10, whereas the Chinese space station normally houses 3 to 4 astronauts at most. There's a long way to go for China to catch up to the International Space Station. However, things may change because once they do expand, at the same time, the ISS is going to be drawn down in terms of its use. It'll be retired probably within the next 6 to 8 years and shut down, basically. Once that happens, Tiangong, China space station, may be the only one that humanity has in orbit left.
Unless, again, I would assume some private companies would be doing the next space station.
Could very well happen, and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos would have a hand in that. I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, we're just about out of time, and I still wanted to get to the moon's history because some samples that were collected a half a century ago are being involved in a new study. So can we go to Patreon and talk about that, among other things?
Let's do it. There's just so much to talk about.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Clear skies.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0797, and you'll find links to Andrew's site, to get your own personal autographed copy of his books. Patreon subscribers, you can hear more of Andrew as a Patreon reward extra, where we'll discuss studying the rocks from the moon 50 years later, Starship's most recent test launch, and what the U.S. government is saying about UFOs. Just go to our Patreon page, and if you are not already a member, become one of the select patrons of the show. Visit patreon.com/The Stuff File Program. You're listening to the Stuff File Program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. The Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
In the UK, a drug dealer was caught after he typed in one wrong number and sent a text advertising crack cocaine to a police officer.
Sorry, wrong numbers. Don't pick it up. Let it ring. A call that will plunge you into one of the most startling stories ever told.
25-year-old Philip Paul sent the bulk message to a group of his customers, but typed in one wrong digit. The incorrect phone number instead belonged to a police officer who reported the text to the proactive investigation team at Surrey Police. I guess this is what you would call the reverse Barbara Stanwyck. Ah, the plight of poor Babs.
What number is it? What am I calling?
Detectives were already aware of a drugs line in Surrey in March, but thanks to the 1 in a million mistake, officers were able to identify Paul as the line holder. He was arrested outside his home, and officers found cash, a wrap of crack cocaine, 3 wraps of heroin, and a bag containing 2 grams of cannabis. A number of messages from users requesting to buy drugs were also found on Paul's phone. Paul of Lewisham, southeast London, pleaded guilty to several charges and was sentenced in West Sussex on November 14th to 3 years imprisonment. Now, why? Oh, why? If you're doing drug deals by phone sending a text, would you not make absolutely sure that you are texting the right numbers? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File Program, number 0797. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled STUPH, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0797. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including kdxradio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WLSLLP-FM in Dade City, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, CFQR 600 in Montreal, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File Program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Any rebroadcast of this copywritten program in whole or in part without the express written consent of... Oh, God, who the hell are we kidding? Who's going to steal this show? God, who writes this stuff? Holder? What a kidder.